All right, welcome to another edition of the Subseasonal Forecast Contest. Today is Wednesday at 12 o'clock. My name is David Margolin. We're here to discuss the forecast made from yesterday, January 12th, looking out toward the end of January. And then for today, it looks like a little bit of a light crowd, so um, we'll have sort of an open discussion here. Um, Michael, what's on your mind? I know just offline we were talking about the AO, maybe talking about the AO and its relationship with cold in the East. Any other topics come to mind?
Um, yeah, I was seeing on Twitter from a reliable meteorologist that he was saying, and I agreed with him on this, not to trust the models outside of 5 days
Uh huh.
due to the PV split, I believe. So that might be an interesting topic of discussion to see how either how accurate the models are following the PV split, which I guess is not very, and to see how that would affect us since we're well beyond the 5 day range.
Yeah,
Uh,
that sounds good. I think that is right. That's definitely a hot topic. The southern stratospheric warming, and I think we talked a little bit about last week, but still a very hot topic. Probably will. Those things aren't short term, so probably be with us for a while. But I think that whole general um, topic would be a good one to hit. So we'll talk about that, and of course that's related to the AO. I also did. We can talk about this if we have a few minutes. I've got a lot of questions. Well, I think we talked about it too. Excuse me. About how what's the question? How has this La Nina event, this year's La Nina event, has it behaved similar to historical uh, La Nina events of similar intensity, moderate to strong? So I did a little analysis on that. I can share it too if you'd like, kind of like a spatial correlation analysis.
yeah, I
Um,
think that'd be interesting to see.
cool. Okay. All right. Let's briefly start with attribution. Just I think it's always helpful to look back, see what's verified. Okay, so our last verification, actually, yeah, this will be really quick because this was during that holiday break, Christmas, New Year's, and such. So not too many people submitted a forecast here. I didn't. I don't think you did. A couple
No.
folks did. But yeah, so I don't obviously I don't, you and I really don't have too much to talk about in terms of what went right or wrong. It just but looking back, it looks like just we can at least look at the models because I think yeah the models are here. So all right, so where's the verification? What did I do with that? There it is. All right, so verification came in at close to 144 HDDs. Get our bearings. The 30 years colder than that at 155, almost 155. 10-year also colder at 150. So it was a warmer than normal verification. Let's just before we look at the maps, so we can see how the models did. And it looks like the models, you know, well, the EC was certainly in the ballpark. Very pretty good forecast there at 140. And then the CFS was, also better than climatology for sure at 141. So pretty good forecast, at least relative to normal, by our numerical guidance, including the CFS. And I think that's been an interesting story too, right? Just to skip around a little bit. I was looking at this the other day. If we look at just the heating season, I believe the CFS is still beating uh, perform. Oh, someone's trying to join here. Let me just see that. Oh, Philip. All right, let's let Philip in. Just saying that the sort this here. Yeah, let's see if it's still the case. Where am I? There's the EC at -2, and then yeah, the CFS at +13. So, and let's see, directionally, the CFS has been right about 92% of the time. I guess they're the same in terms of directional hit rate, but But yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting story. Now, obviously, we only pull one forecast weekly. EC is issued twice weekly. So there's a question of sample size. But even with that, I don't think and welcome, Philip. I think you just joined. We were just going through our attribution here. And the other thing I mentioned, I think it's pretty light crowd today, so we can delve off into any kind of research topics here. Um, with that said, we were just talking about the CFS and EC, and I can't remember since we started the contest being this deep into a season where the CFS has been outperforming the EC. So interesting. I don't know why that is. But anyone else have any, before we go back to this weekly verification, anyone else have any thoughts on CFS versus ECMWF performance this winter?
I mean, I'll just toss out two things. A, I don't think that was on anybody's bingo card to say that the
Ah,
CFS would be outperforming the EC by 15 points. That surprises. I mean, to see it in even top one, two, three, four, five, six, top seven. Or I guess tied for seventh place, even with our human forecasters, not including consensus. I mean, I don't think anyone saw that coming, and the only thing I can attribute to that is um I can only think of two possibilities. Is A, it could be something to do with the updates both models got in the past year or two. I can't remember exactly when, but I know they've both been updated recently. Um, or maybe this is just happens to be the Cinderella pattern for the CFS, and it just is having a great time being able to read and understand this pattern, and it's a nightmare for the EC to do the same. Those are the only two things I can think of, and I'm not. I haven't done any research into as to which one of those might be the case, or maybe it's neither even. But those are the only two things I can think of.
yeah, the upgrade's certainly a possibility there. Philip, anything on your radar?
I think one of the things I noticed is if you sort by consensus performance, let's see if my suspicions are right. No one is beating consensus, and EC is still outperforming the euro, but in terms of the performance, they're all negative. But I think it's interesting that
Yeah,
although no one's done, yes, it looks like people have done generally okay, but it seems like no one can beat consensus overall, where the consensus forecast is still probably the best
I think
that we
I,
have.
th- I think Philip might have a career in politics because I think he just evaded my question, but he did bring up another interesting point, right? About the consensus, right? It is that is an interesting thing, right? You could see consensus as is I think we've seen this before. In fact, I think if we go to our historical record here, consensus, just to delve off onto that topic for a second here, I think it's historically been one of the best. Yeah, there's now this is I just clicked on all forecasts, so there's a lot of forecasts here. Consensus 114 forecasts all the way on the right, and there's not too many folks who have beat consensus that have forecasted, Sean 27, 15, 2, 27, 12, 13, 2, 10. So Philip, you're actually, the closest here who's forecasted, let's say, three quarters, 75% of the time, even 50% of the time. So that is a good point. I mean, consensus that I mean, that is a whole nother sort of interesting research topic for sure. Like, I mean, the wisdom of crowds type thing. This definitely does seem to show it, right? Like there's a whole, I think, interesting study just looking at that. The fact that consensus has been the best, really the best forecast, at least in terms of the CRPS. Let's see, in terms of directional hit rate, that might be a different story. Let's see. It's out of curiosity though. Yeah, it's not quite as distinct. For example, there are a few folks like Philip, is he up there? Professor Decker. He's submitted a number of forecasts and stuff like that. But certainly in terms of CRPS and things like that, it's been a good forecast. But I just want to add one other thing to just going back to the question about CFS and EC, and normally I'll just add one other thing to what Michael said, in terms, kind of characteristics or what have you. If you had told me this right 2 months ago that this far into the season, the CFS would be killing or not killing, but beating the EC, I would have said, okay, I guess it's been a really cold start to the winter, right? That would be my first thought. Like broken clock is right twice a day. It's been screaming cold in November and December. And so, CFS is usually cold and it just kind of lucked out. But that's not the answer either, right, guys? I mean, looking at the map, if we go back to, I don't know, I mean, the contest obviously started in October, but I'll just go back to November. And if we just kind of look at, I have to go back 1 month. Yeah. It hasn't been, it, it hasn't been a cold start to the winter. So really interesting. Maybe that if, kind of, if you put me on the spot, so to speak, my best guess would be what Michael said, that something's changed. I mean, it's almost too much of a coincidence. A warm forecast, a warm verification, and this deep into the season, the CFS being better than the EC. I guess another theory could be that sometimes this happens. The EC had an upgrade, and it had a negative impact on some of the regional temperatures or something forecasts or something like that. But interesting nonetheless. So anyone else have any thoughts on that before we kind of change topics?
All right, not to actually answer the question. Yeah, I think that's also what I found surprising, that it wasn't a super cold pattern that got the EC to have such good marks, but it was a warm pattern. And if we look at the numbers, if you recall the old summer thing where we were adding a certain bias correction to the CFS, like I ditched that by the second or third week of the heating season, where I stopped using any kind of bias correction because I realized that the numbers were going to be way too warm if I used the CFS with the bias correction. And in fact, I think was it like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I remember looking at the CFS and it had a couple of bad weeks, so I stopped weighting it again. So if you look at my weights, I forgot to submit a forecast this past Tuesday, but last week I submitted one and I didn't weight the CFS, but it looks like the CFS is still, it's still got something, right? Like the most recent verification of January 6 to 10, it still has a positive score. So it looks like it's hard to say if this is just a blip in terms of statistics or if this is really a trend.
No, I'm sorry. Did you say? I mean, there was a bias this summer, right?
Yeah, the summer bias was very obvious, but I mean,
Right.
going into the heating season.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
When the heating season started, I remember looking at the numbers and I was like, I can't add 9 HDDs to. I can't subtract 9 HDDs from the CFS, or else the numbers were going to be way too low.
No, that's a good point. Let's look at the last, since we have it here. Let's look at what it did. I mean, so this is last year, right?
There's a
13.
consistent 10 again.
Yeah, and then we can go back one more, right? Can we? Let's see. Yeah, we can. Yeah, okay. It wasn't as, I guess it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't that bad the year before. But
Its CRPS score was still really bad, though.
yeah, it was. It was just generally bad. But yeah, I mean, the bias this year has been non-existent, right? I mean, well, not completely zero, but pretty close. So yeah, interesting. Interesting. I guess it'll be interesting. Remember Nat Johnson did that really cool bias correction analysis for us, and kind of showed that if you had been, I don't know, using it at least for last summer stuff, it would have helped. But maybe that's no longer the case. We'll have to see how this rolls into the summer, and maybe when we have someone like Nat Johnson back on the line, we can ask him some questions. Maybe he has more, or it would be great to get like a Kyle McRitchie, who works at CPC. He may have more information on that. So But if anyone, at the water cooler or whatever, if you hear anything about changes to the CFS, changes that actually led to improvements, yeah, definitely let us know. All right, cool. Let's see. I think that was, again, it was kind of a quiet week because it was over the holidays, so I don't think we had too much, maybe more to talk about.
Oh yeah,
So
and
yeah,
I remember this. I just suddenly thought of it as we were talking about upgrades. We know that the GEFS was recently upgraded, and it now covers the 16 to 20-day period. The ensembles. I was wondering if there was any plan, if there's any way to get the data for the 16 to 20-day period and start putting it in as another input.
that's a good point. I think the answer is yes. Well, I think the answer is yes. Yeah, that's a correct way to put it. I think yes. We'll have to at some point maybe talk to our friends at Maxar, right? And who supply us all the CFS and ECMWF data that kind of goes into this. But my guess is that they're probably doing it. I don't see it on their website that we have access to, but I'm guessing it's somewhere. Or if they haven't done it, that they're going to do it very soon.
Okay.
And once they do it, I think we can look into adding that for sure as like another input here. Have the GEFS extension, which yeah, I think once a day now it goes out beyond day 16, so we can catch that day 16 to 20, and that'd be really nice, right? From both the forecast exercise, but also from a research exercise, to see how it compares to the CFS and whatnot. Yeah, it's a good point.
And
Yeah.
and I guess just to continue on this topic of upgrades, I know there was some talk with some of the recent snowstorms how the latest upgrade to the GFS, which is still in the testing phase, appears to be performing better than the current operational GFS. And I know at some point the plan is that the CFS will also be replaced with the upgraded GFS core. And I wonder if that's going to throw a wrench into a lot of our current bias correction / statistical verification stuff.
I think it probably, I mean, the short answer is probably yes, right? It's like that's always the challenge with I mean, a wrench. I think wrench, but I'm not saying that it makes it useless, right? Wrench meaning it makes it a little more complicated, right?
Yeah.
You know, um, I think anytime you get upgrades, right, you have to look at, try to understand what the likely impact's going to be from a research perspective, and then operationally, you actually kind of have to track it. And with that said, like we know with the GFS has had most versions of the GFS, right, going back over a decade, have had a cold bias, right, just like this
Yeah.
summer. And so, and there's been, I don't know, probably dozens of upgrades. So, just because you get an upgrade doesn't necessarily mean it's going to change, the surface temperature bias in the United States. But, you have to do due diligence. And I was think and that's why setting up a system like this, and even more comprehensive, if you were really, really trying to understand it, you want to be able to look at the reforecast data, the historical biases, but you also want to be constantly reviewing the short-term changes so that you can adjust if necessary. And yeah, but I think a wrench is the right word. That it definitely means, hey, you gotta try to see if the expectation is it's gonna change the bias, and if it does, then you may have to, if you're using some sort of bias correction that focuses on the reforecast, like a long-term historical, you may have to there could be a couple different strategies. Maybe you weight it less, or maybe you put more weight on short-term bias correction, or maybe you even have a thread that has no bias correction, and you kind of review performance over a period of time. But yeah, tricky. Any other thoughts on that? I was like looking at again, since we're kind of we're kind of winging it a little bit today. I One thing I'd still love to see more of I don't know, and maybe one of you guys will develop something like this. But I'd love to see a better. It just seems like so much of the bias correction is based off of station level, region level, global level, and it's focused on like temperature, which I understand. That makes sense, and there's good reason why we have that, right? But I think it would be great to see more spatial pattern kind of bias corrections, right? Like I know here and there I've seen stuff over the years, but not anything comprehensive. How often do we talk about the question of like the NAO? Is there a systematic bias associated with NAO and temperatures in the eastern United States, i.e., that if you're in a significant negative NAO regime or positive NAO regime or PNA or certain type of global state, I think that would be to develop a catalog and then ultimately some sort of algorithm. Assuming that there are, assuming that the initial research suggests that there's something worth following up on, I think it could be really helpful to develop algorithms that are pattern based as opposed to just, you know, um, temperature based or station temperatures. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean that sounds like it would be a good idea. I'm not sure how someone would begin to put that into practice. But um, but yeah, that's it sounds like it's a good idea.
I think the complication here is how to create some algorithm that doesn't end up just basically completely rewriting the model. Since I guess bias correction, there's like a lot of ways you could approach it, but like the more complicated you make it, then the more things that could go wrong. And at some point, there's the trade-off of do you just continue with bias correction or do you just rewrite the model? I guess. Although I don't
Well,
know what the level like the what threshold that would be.
well, sure. And I guess I'm wearing maybe I'm wearing a little bit more. Although I think there's a kind of a research benefit, of sort of parallel research benefit. But let's just say we're put in our private sector. We're putting that hat on, operational forecaster. We're trying to get the best forecast. Then you can't always wait, right? You can't always wait for the best model or new model. Um, and just to make it a little bit more specific in terms of an example of what I'm talking about, or like if I could just you uh, magically make this appear, like again, like last summer. Let's talk about last summer, right? We had this. What was that bias again? Right, -9, right, from the CFS. I would love to know, is that bias? So we have a -9 bias, but where does that come from? Right? Is it always there and it's very consistent? Maybe that's the case, right? That bias is pretty steady and pretty consistent regardless of what you throw at the pattern. And that's good to know. And that may be the answer. And if that is the answer, then a -9, and let's just assume for simplicity here that that's still the case. Like they haven't changed the model. That -9 is the best you can do, or add 9 back to the model or whatever it is. That's the best you can do. But if I had a magic ball and I could create, you know, just a research effort to do this, I would love to dig into that a little bit more because I suspect it's not that simple. And I suspect that there could be some really good findings, pattern-based corrections, if we dug a little deeper. If we, and you do get into sample size, but still, especially with data that runs daily, like the CFS, you can have a decent amount. And I would love to look at that and subset that by, all right, I've got the entire season, and maybe I have 10 years of data even. Let's say 10 summers, and let's assume that they're all, on average a -9, -10 bias. I'd love to say, all right, now I'm going to divide that up. I'm going to divide that up by different regimes, and at even different time scales. Like, if this gets a little trickier if you're going to talk about ENSO timescales because there's less years, but I still might do it anyway, right? Because some data is better than no data, in my opinion. And I'd say, okay, what does that bias look like El Nino versus La Nina versus neutral, right? Then more granular, MJO regimes, MJO phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Now you have a pretty good amount of data. And now synoptic scale regimes, right? PNA, whatever teleconnections you want to look at that you think are relevant to temperatures in this case, United States. I might look at, NAO, PNA. I might, things like that. AO, whatever, a couple other different regimes, that come to mind. So, and again, if out of that that number didn't change in a meaningful way, I think then okay, there is no sort of you know nothing you can kind of hang your hat on in terms of a particular regime. But what if, right? What if the NAO is something like a minus 12 or 14, whereas some of the other patterns are like a minus 5, minus 6? Then all of a sudden you have something that you can utilize potentially to make a better forecast. So anyway, that's just to give you a more specific kind of sort of framework of how I might approach that. Any thoughts or comments?
Yes. My thought is that sounds like it would be similar to the ideas that we had about, say, the MJO analog and maybe even ENSO or teleconnections, where you sort of split that MJO analog instead of just having it be overall, like if the MJO is here, this is what you do. Basically, a no filter whatsoever. But like maybe I feel like it would be a similar process in terms of splitting MJO into maybe combining it with, say, if MJO is in phase 6 and there's also a strong positive PNA or something like that. I
That's
guess
right.
it would be similar in terms of verifying the model bias. Only in this case, or in the model case, it's just a general what is the model's bias, and in this case, it's what is the correlation between the MJO phase with the anomaly, but with an additional filter.
That's exactly right. Like you could do it absolutely on this type of chart, just to piggyback on what you said, and have it like you said. I might even do like bias and mean absolute error, right? Because both those things could be relevant in terms of an operational forecast situation, right?
Mhm.
Bias would be nice, kind of, hey, does it tend to be too warm, too cold, whatever. That's huge, obviously. But even mean absolute error, right? Because if you know that, hey, when the MGO is initialized, and I'm going to leave out initialized versus forecast, but you might look at both of those situations. Like, hey, today it's in phase 3 versus it's forecast to be in phase 3. But for this conversation, to keep it simple, which we're not going to separate those. So let's just say phase 3. Let's say we know in phase 3 the absolute error is, I don't know, 2 times higher than normal, and in phase 7 it's 50% of normal. That's really awesome information for me as a forecaster, because I can tell the guys, no, whoever my end users are, guys, big distribution here. I know I sometimes tell you a lot of uncertainty, but I actually have quantitative data that tells me high uncertainty. So this is a real situation. And maybe or maybe not that the market is seeing it that way. The market, who knows? They might be saying, oh, it's a warm forecast and we have high confidence. You're saying, I know it's a warm forecast, guys, but boy, oh boy, there's a lot of tails on this thing. Vice versa, obviously, being able to say, guys, I feel really, really strongly that this forecast is going to verify whatever it is, cold, warm, whatever it is. So yeah, I like that, Philip. I think that could be, and just before you got on offline, Michael brought up, hey, been hearing a lot about the stratospheric vortex, the split, and some folks online saying that when you have a split like this, the numerical guide, and if I'm saying this wrong, Michael, jump in, but the numerical guidance goes to crap like after day 5. Okay, that's an interesting theory. It's not the first time I've heard something along the lines of that. In certain stratospheric regimes, forecast model performance goes down, degrades. I, my, I haven't seen really hard research on that, or at least in a while. But it seems, I think there could be something there. But the reason I hesitate is because, there's, that's also the difference between really it saying it goes to crap, beyond day 5. That is a very strong statement, right? Like these days, there's forecast skill on average, right, out to, plus or minus, let's say around day 15, depending on which model, depending, let's say around day 15. Maybe it's day 12, maybe it's day 17, depending on the model, but somewhere out there, right? So saying after day 5 there's no skill, that is a huge, if you can quantify that and show that, that is huge, right? That is a massive drop off of skill from day 15 to day 5 or day 6. But if it's really just, oh, it's a 5% change on day 15, okay, that's still good to know. But those are two very, very different things. And so when I hear something like that, my first thought is, boy, I would love to be able to do an objective analysis. And we could, right? Obviously, similar to kind of what we're just talking about, we'd obviously need, you know, more, to depending on exactly how we approach it, but we'd have to have an index, a log of stratospheric regimes. When was the vortex normal, split, whatever, stable, however you want to do it, and then look at model performance during those situations, 10 days out, 20 days out, whatever. You could do it, right? So I don't know, Michael or Philip, any thoughts on that?
I was actually just thinking that we could kind of check that because of the on Maxar's website they have that 500 millibar pattern. I forget what they call it. You know what I'm talking about. They have the 500 millibar pattern. I guess pattern. I can't remember the name.
Verification?
It might be verification. I can't remember if it's that or not, but it's got like a bunch of Yeah, I think it's this.
This guy?
So yeah, it shows. Yeah. So if we could technically use this, and we could look at it in how do I
Yeah.
say this? So we could look at this and see if there was any significant drop off when the PV split, since we do have that information. I believe it was about a week or so ago, maybe 2. And then we could correlate that or cross-check that with, well, here's when it's split, and here's about where the model forecast started to go downhill. Because it looks to me, just kind of looking at this, it's kind of up and down,
Yeah.
but it's
a
around
huge spread.
January 1st. Yeah, it looks like there's maybe even a little before that. Starts to be a huge spread, and now things start to be coming back together a little bit. It looks like, but um, you know, this I think would be if somebody wanted to do it. I think this would be
This is
the
great.
easiest way to do it for sure.
That's a super great point. I mean, that is a super, super great point. This is a classic case too of, again, sometimes some data is better than no data. So you're right. You're absolutely right, Michael. We definitely should monitor this over the next several weeks, and let's see. Let's just see visually. Obviously, it's one event, it's one data point, but still, it's very relevant, and we can especially if there's a huge drop off after day 5, you would expect to be able to pick that out visually, right? I mean, if the 11 to 15 day skill, I'm sorry, if the 1 to 5 or the 6 to 10 day skill is going to drop off, because look at the y-axis here, right? And I know there's like synoptic variability or whatever, but you kind of see what the range is here between 0.2 and 0.8, 0.2, 0.8, 0.2, 0.6, whatever. If we pull up the 6 to 10, on the other hand,
Just the comment, that is an amazingly huge range. I was not expecting the range to be that big for 11 to 15. And I wasn't expecting
Yeah.
a cyclic appearance either to the verification.
Yeah, and this is not the first time I've seen this cyclic variability. Um, again, I'm speaking more qualitatively, but we see this a lot. We see this all the time, I would say, more than not. It seems like it follows the synoptic patterns, kind of. Which again comes back to, I think, leading us to believe that, I mean, it's tricky, right? It's tricky. Because, yeah, I mean, some of the synoptic variability you probably can't predict. But I think it does give some hope that some of these synoptic patterns are more and less predictable than others. But yeah, I mean, we can see if the 6 to 10 days skill drops off. It should at least drop off into that range of the 11 to 15, right? Um, if that idea that was out there was correct, that after day 5 the model skill really goes to crap, right? We should see maybe situations that drop down to 0.2 or something like that, or just we should see a big dip, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, it looks like there were 2 dips, but I think those are. I know I think around December 16th was that snowstorm that dropped all that snow in the Buffalo area. I think around that time. So I guess that would make sense. And then I guess the January 5th one, I guess there was another storm there. I don't remember. It might have just been rain here. That's probably why I don't remember it. But
yeah, and again, I don't think this is strat yet, right? I
yeah,
I think this is because I mean, yeah, this goes back to December 4th. So, but I mean arguably, yeah. Does anyone know off the top of their head when the strat officially, they called it a warming or there was a split?
I think if you take a look I don't know if they have it, but there's charts I've seen
The
online.
wind or the temperature in the 10
Yeah, when the
millibar.
wind yeah, when the wind reverses, I think that officially counts as a strat warming, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
it does.
And
But does anyone remember? Do you remember what date that was?
I
let me
don't.
see if I
I
can
want to
look
say
it
it was
up.
like a week ago, but I don't remember
Okay.
exactly.
You know what though? Honestly, if it's about a weekish, let's just keep track of it, right? Because I'm assuming the rule of thumb is, uh, well, yeah, it should be now forecast. I guess if let's say it happened a week ago, right? So I guess it should be now. These forecasts that are rolling in, right? Just starting to roll in. If it happened a week ago, the day 6 and 7 forecast just rolled in, right? So we have like one or two data points in terms of the day 6, 7 forecast. If we're taking this to the nth degree, right? But basically, it's going to be a few weeks from now until we get like day 15, day 10 data, of meaningful length. But I guess we'll just be able to watch this week to week and see, over the next several weeks, as a function of this stratospheric warming, which to my knowledge, it's ongoing, right? I mean, these things are usually not synoptic in scale, right? They are, uh, yeah, this thing is still kicking, and it's expected to kick for the next couple weeks. So let's see what happens. Let's see if we see a big deterioration in skill. I guess on top of that, and arguably related, the MJO, right? That's not what I wanted. The MJO is also it's a very, I had it up, I closed it. It's a very messy forecast, complicated forecast. It looks to me, arguably, you might say that also um, could allow for lower confidence forecast. Again, be interesting to do an analysis on this. You have it's in phase 3 and it's a nice amplitude. Canonical kind of progression would say, all right, it's going to move through 4 or 5 into 6, right, in the next couple of weeks. But instead, it's taking a beeline to phase 7. That to me looks like there's a lot of interference. There's a lot of complicated factors here. Is that also a hint? And not necessarily independent, because maybe there's a lot of extratropical, tropical interactions going on here, but also another hint that maybe the numerical guidance is going to have a tough time, beyond days 5 or 10. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I can say, because I was looking at this last week for my forecast, that this looks nothing like what I saw last week.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll add in is that I just this is just a personal thing. I really hope it goes into phase 7. That's a little bit of a colder phase for the East, I think, or at least it starts to be. winters with no snow until mid-March.
Yeah.
But looking at some of the stuff online, it looks like, and this is a rough estimate, that it's split around January 5th. So that
Yeah, it's about a week. Yeah.
ironically, that's when all those dips in the verification seem to happen in the longer range, because if that 6 to 10 showed a dip around January 5th. That's probably coincidental, but certainly still bears watching. As for the MJO, I haven't been paying all that much attention to it. I mean, I've been checking it. I haven't been including it in any forecasts, but uh, I'm kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Hesitant to believe that it's actually going to move out of the null phase or out of its destructive interference. Not sure which one of the two it is right now. Just because it's been showing, I'm pretty sure the forecasts, I don't know if we have them going back any further, but I'm pretty sure the forecasts have been for it to go out into some phase for the past couple of weeks. I've been, the EC especially, I think, was saying, oh, it's going to phase 3 and it's going to progress through, or phase 4 and it's going to progress through, or phase 2 and it's going to progress through, or so I'm kind of hesitant to believe that it will actually head into phase 7 or 6 or 8 or wherever it's going there. But who knows? Been wrong before.
Yeah.
I know they have a whole bunch of other MJO predictions on this website as well. So if you want, you can look at those. I think if you
Yeah.
click on the MJO, yeah, okay, yeah. This. So I don't know how accurate some of these other ones are, but it seems to be kind of all over the place still.
Yep.
Real giving new meaning to the word spaghetti plot.
Basically, in 3 weeks, the MJO could be in either phases 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or null phase. Take your pick.
Yeah, I mean, there's some extreme cases here, all the way strong phase 3, all the way to a really strong phase 6, 7. But yeah, maybe that's a good segue. Just we have a few minutes to the forecast. Let's shift gears for a second. Just give
One
everyone.
last thing I want
Oh,
to
yeah.
add before we do. I just want to also add in that sometimes I read that during the winter where they had the blizzard of 78, and then possibly also the Snowmageddon year in 2016 or whatever year that was, 2016 I think it was, that sometimes the
2010.
polar vortex will, sometimes the polar vortex will override that MJO signal and just kind of create its own pattern. So that's something that we should also be aware of.
Yeah, and I think that's so let me switch here. But I think that is kind of what I was alluding to a little bit. Like, where's this interference coming from? Could it be coming from the extratropics, right? Like that sometimes a lot of times the MJO is able to push around. It's not very researchy, but push around the extratropics, right? MJOs obviously kind of emanate and circumvent the tropics, and then you get the Rossby wave dispersion into the extratropics. But sometimes it's you get a lot of energy into it, right? So maybe in part, maybe because the extratropics and the high latitudes are so active right now, so much forcing, maybe that is going to mitigate it. um, I know I definitely kind of segueing a little bit into the forecast. I thought about this, right? And Michael kind of alluded to it. If you look at a traditional canonical expectation projection from the MJO forecast, and we see it in our MJO analog, which I'll show in a second, you would expect a warm outcome. It's near the peak, right, of what you might expect. But is this going to be canonical? That's the $1 million question. Is it, or is something going on here where you should? Let's look at our MJO forecast today. So this is from the 12th. I'll just filter or rank. So the MJO, yeah, there's the MJO 145, which is, significantly below the 30-year. So the MJO analog says this is going to be warm, but of course the MJO, our analog, it knows about the phase, it knows about the amplitude, but it's agnostic in terms of the progression. It doesn't care if it progressed cohesively or whatever, boom, boom, boom. It also doesn't care if it did exactly what happened. It includes a mean, right, of all those events. So it's not necessarily saying historically I'm ignoring events where there wasn't progression or whatever. It's just it takes all those, right? And of all that, it comes up with the number you see here. So all right, with that, let me turn over to you guys in our last few minutes here. Oh, Philip, you see you didn't put a forecast in, but I'll let you talk here in a sec. Michael, did you have a forecast in here?
Yeah, I do, and I just
there you
I'll
Yeah.
tell you my 2 cents here in a sec, but I just want to toss out that CFS we were talking about at length today is the most accurate model, and it's been one of the more accurate forecasts this winter. It's got the coldest forecast by a couple of HDDs, only Matt Rogers and Dave D'Arcangelo, and I believe that's Maxar even really that close to it in terms of its HDDs. So that's be interesting to see if that winds up being the case, that it continues to be on the cooler side of things. As for my forecast, I kept with my the same strategy I've been using, blend of the EC and 10-year, which I actually have a question about, but I'll wait to the end for that. And then, took a look at the teleconnections. It's been the same story. NAO and AO have been fairly negative. PNA has also, it looks like it wants to go negative. I'm hesitant to believe that though, because it has been at the upper end of the guidance, especially at the 11 to 15-day range. So we'll have to see if it's more of a neutral, muted PNA, or if it does actually end up going negative. CPC forecast, it's basically just says normal temperatures everywhere but the Southwest, which isn't a very big HDD producer anyway. So I didn't really didn't move my number much from that, and then just increased my number by about what I do 6, I think ish, based on that negative NAO AO regime. And yeah, but it looks like about 5. So my thinking basically is that the NAO and AO will finally start acting like it's supposed to, and finally bring some cooler air or colder air into important demand regions like Boston, New York, probably even Chicago, and cities and all the cities in between. There's my map. Thinking a little bit of coolness in the eastern regions, a little above normal in the western regions. Didn't see anything to indicate that the Pac Northwest will be any different than around normal. So above normal in California will swing that, and then figuring that the Texas region there will probably be around normal, and that the final region, the northern half of that, will probably be either normal to slightly below, and then the southern half will probably be either normal to slightly above. So that just kind of evens out. That's just my thought process there. And then one question I had, I don't know when they'll have it, but since it's now 2021, that should mean that we're updating our normal, our 30-year and 10-year. I don't know when that happens, but I was just my question would be was like I don't know. That's basically my question. When would that be happening if you know?
Yeah, actually, I think they did. I just have to. This is hard coded, but we can double
Yeah,
check. But I think they did. Like, let's look at an example here. This is 151 or 8110, and let's look at their report. I think they just did it. Let's see if it's in the report.
looks like
Well, it's the same
Phil had
number.
to leave. It looks
Yeah.
like he said. guess I should have let him go first. Oh, well.
Okay, so what period was this for again?
January, I think it's 6 to 10, 6 to 11, yeah.
Okay, the normal was, oh no, they didn't update. Okay, no, they did the, hold on one second. Let's do the,
Looks like they updated the 10-year, but not the
oh, I'm
30
sorry.
year.
I was looking at the right. Yeah, exactly. So I think the answer is the 10 years already been updated, and this is sort of an automated process. So we pull whatever they give us. So I think the 10
Yeah.
years, but that's a good question. I'll have to keep track of that. So I think the 10 years updated. I don't think the 30 years updated yet, but my guess is, I haven't asked them, but my guess is they'll probably have that within the next couple months. It could be a little bit longer for the 8110, just because usually it depends how they calculate it. A lot of groups, they internally process, right, the 10-year, they create that themselves, but sometimes you get the official 81 to 2000, and or I guess in this case, the 30-year normal you get maybe from NOAA or something, and NOAA may not publish it for a while, so that may take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So I'll have to say.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I think a lot of people do use the 30. I think they used to use the 30-year at the very least. And tossing in that also changes some of our scoring. Since I would imagine that 30-year would be getting warmer, so it probably help some scores out.
Yeah, it could. All right. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that. Anything else? Yeah, Philip dropped off here. Anything else in the last couple minutes on your mind?
No, the only thing I'll say is that this is certainly a colder looking forecast than I've seen recently, as I can recall. A lot of people, looks like only Dr. Lupo is below the 30 years, our human forecasters. So, seems like a general consensus is going to be cold forecast. And Dr. Decker, I guess. Dr. Roundy.
Yeah, so I would say,
Well,
I don't know if I'd say consensus, but
now I'm a little more nervous about it.
I'd say that I think there's a fair amount of spread actually. But yeah, let's stay tuned, right? There's a lot here I think to chomp on. Well, I suspect, again, based on how the stratospheric, the length, duration of these stratospheric warmings, we'll probably have a lot to talk about for a while in terms of how this is going to impact the forecast one way or the other. So to be continued, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for playing, Mike. We'll see you next week, and we'll do it again.
I should see you on Friday for the
Oh, Friday, great.
The administrative meeting or whatever they call it.
All right, that sounds good.
All right, well,
talk to you soon.
Yep, bye.
Thank you. Bye.